So yeah, thank you for joining the session. Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. I have 15 minutes, so I will try to be quick on this. We have a couple of slides to go through. And I want to start this session by basically with the question that everyone is asking right now, and this is, what are we doing about generative AI? Or what are we doing with generative AI? And even at this conference, I had like a lot of conversations about this topic. Some of the sessions are about this topic. And it's an interesting question, don't get me wrong, it's an important question. But I think it makes sense to change the perspective, at least for a moment, and not to ask, what are we doing with generative AI, but what is our audience doing with generative AI, our target audience, what are they doing? It can be consumers, it can be B2B buyers, but what are they doing? And I think the answer to this question is, probably there are many answers, but one of the answers is that these people, our target audience, are using generative AI tools, the popular ones like ChatGPT, maybe Google Gemini, maybe Perplexity. They are using these tools to do research. And they are researching as well brands, products. They are asking product-related questions. They might ask for a recommendation for a specific product in a specific category, or they might seek help with the product they already have. So they are asking these kinds of questions. And this is interesting because this turns these tools, I'm not sure about the terminology, but it turns these tools into maybe like customer touch points or something like, there's a lot of slides like this, something like customer touch points or something like a communications channel. Like I said, I'm not sure about the terminology, but there's something there, and this is what we are looking at. The issue is, with this whole thing, that brands right now, they have zero visibility into this. Like, I don't know right now, like how often is my brand or how often are my products mentioned in the responses of these tools? In which context are they mentioned? I don't know, how can this maybe impact buying decisions by my target audience? So this is a black box for me, and I have zero insight into this. And this is a problem, it's an obvious problem. The question is, what is the solution? And think about search engine optimization for a moment. And I'm sure everyone has a basic concept of what it is. Basically, you look at how do I turn up, or how does my website, for example, turn up in the search results, and then you think of ways to optimize your rankings there. And now think of the same concept, but for generative AI tools. We call this generative AI optimization, short Gaio, and this is basically an attempt to understand and influence the answers that these tools give. And if we make the comparison to SEO, I think it becomes quite clear. Well, SEO is about web search, Gaio is about generative AI tools, like I mentioned. While SEO is about influencing search results, Gaio is about influencing answers or responses. And while for SEO we are trying to generate backlinks, at least in the purest form of SEO, here we are trying to create like brand mentions and product mentions. This is also why this is very interesting for us as an agency, because we are mostly a PR agency, also some marketing stuff, and we are specialists for creating these kind of mentions. So this is basically the idea. And you might say now, okay, I understand the concept. Why are you talking about this at this conference? This is a measurement conference. What does this have to do with measurement? And I think it has everything to do with measurement. Because the first step, like the very first step to create this visibility that I talked about that is currently lacking, and to create this transparency, is to measure. And basically we said, okay, how can we measure this? And what we did is we looked at the methodology that already existed, and we looked at, like, you remember when the whole hype started, there was a lot of research into bias in generative AI. Like, for example, if you prompt a CEO, you would get like, or most of the time you would get like an image of a white man, for example. And people wrote scientific papers about this, and they have this scientifically validated methodology for this. And we thought, okay, let's look at their approach and see if maybe we can adapt it, also upscale it, and use it to pull other information that we are interested in, like, for example, product mentions, brand mentions. And this is the basic idea. I won't bore you with too many details, also for the sake of time. And we came up with this methodology, and then we said, okay, let's build like a tool that does this. And I'm proud to say, 2 days ago, we launched this tool. We are currently, it's a very early thing, like early access phase, with some selected clients who can use it. And we launched this tool for them, and now I want to talk to you, like what kind of data we can pull from this. And the example I want to talk about is basically headphone recommendations by ChatGPT. If you're like me, you will keep breaking your headphones, because I have to buy one basically every year because I keep breaking them. If you're even more like me, you will blame the headphones for this, even you have this unhealthy pattern of breaking them. And this means I need a new recommendation every year, and I need a new model because it's the model's fault, the headphones' fault, so I need a new model of headphones. So I go for a recommendation. Okay, where can I get a recommendation? I can go to Google, obviously, I can Google it, but I can also ask ChatGPT or Perplexity or something else. And the interesting thing is that these recommendations are quite good, actually. And we wanted to find out in this data set, we want to say, okay, ChatGPT, what kind of headphones do they recommend in certain categories, if I have certain like needs, or say I work in an office, or I'm a gamer, I need gaming headphones or whatever. And we looked at this, and what we get from this, for example, is like we can see the top mentioned brands, which are the most recommended brands. Sony, Sennheiser, Bose, I don't know if you can read this. So some of the expected ones, also some like insider tips, quite interesting. We can see the top recommended products. Also, not many surprises there as well, but it's like the ones you would buy probably, or you would also find with Google, or if you ask an expert, they recommend it. We also do something like, we call it share of AI or whatever, because we have a PR audience basically, and they like the share of voice thing. So it's a pie chart. Not a big fan, but they want to see their size of the pie compared to competitors. And what I can also see, and I think this is the most interesting thing about this, is I can see some of the sources for this information. And you say, okay, where do you come up with the sources? And the thing is, if you ask for a product recommendation, I just had a very interesting conversation before this talk about this. The interesting thing is, like, these tools don't necessarily pull the information they give you from the training data, because on the application layer, they all have a web browsing feature. And this web browsing feature for ChatGPT, for example, was rolled out for the free version as well, so everyone right now is using this version. And if you ask for a recommendation, obviously you need current information. And then what the tool does, because it has a knowledge cutoff for the training data, it says, okay, let me browse the web for you. And then it pulls the recommendations from the web. And we can see the top cited domains in terms of sources here. And what I find interesting about this is it's not like what you would maybe expect, like the top 10 search results on Google or on Bing for if you look for headphones or whatever. Because there you would get e-commerce, and there you would get like manufacturer pages. But here what you get, it's interesting, you get basically, quote unquote, independent sources of information. Like, for example, these are expert blogs, or these are product review pages like Wirecutter. So stuff like this, if you go into the B2B space, you will have trade publications. And these are the kind of sources that are currently cited. And this is so very unique list of domains. On the right, you see the top mentioned individual URLs that we have found out. And maybe if you look at this, you will immediately get an idea of how this data is actionable. Because you can look at this and you can say, measured by like number of citations, these are the most influential sources when it comes to headphone recommendations by ChatGPT. And what you can do is you can click on the link, maybe on the top link in this list. We can click because we had to use screenshots. We wanted to show you the dashboard, but they said use screenshots. So some screenshots, we could in theory click on this link, and what we would get is this page would open, which is an article. It's like the best headphones for 2024 by PCMag, quite a reputable publication, I think. And this is basically like the most cited source for headphone recommendations by ChatGPT. And like I said, Hotwire is a PR agency. And if I had a headphone client, producer of headphones, a company that sells headphones, what I would do then, and this is what I meant by this data is actionable in some way. What I would do then, I would go to them, I would talk to them, and I would show them this data and say, take a look, and I would share them this article, and I would say, hey, maybe, how about we give this guy Tim Gideon and this guy Ben Moore, how about we give them a call, and we make sure next year our headphone is in this review, because by our measurement, this is the most influential article when it comes to headphone recommendations by ChatGPT, and we think this matters. And this is basically the idea. I have to say this is very early stages. This is all kind of experimental. We're improving the methodology almost every week because it's like we learn a lot. But this is where we are at, and we're really proud to launch this. And I just wanted to show you this. This is generative AI optimization in a nutshell. I hope you find it interesting. And I think we have 3 minutes left, so maybe there's time for question if you have some. Thank you.
Everyone who is virtually can hear you. Sorry about that.
Sorry, no, that's okay. Let me say it again. I'm not using ChatGPT a lot, surprisingly, for some reason. But how did you get the top domains? Is it something that I could easily access as a user, or did you use any kind of independent tools?
So how do we? I just understood half of it, I think. But you said, how do we get access to the top domains, right?
Yeah.
So basically, like you pull all the other information. So if the web browsing gets activated, the tools cite the sources. They give you like a URL. So, and we can look at this data and say, okay, what are the most mentioned?
Okay, thank you.
Hi, great
Hi.
presentation. You mentioned that you are able to do this because the GPT goes online and looks for present information. What about cases where we're not looking for necessarily like the latest reviews, but we're looking for something more general? Is there still a way to influence the GPTs, or do we just have to wait for the cutoff date to be updated every 12 months?
Yes. So this is a very interesting question. I think for many cases that are interesting to us, we see web browsing becoming more and more relevant, because obviously the cutoff dates of these models are moving closer to the present. But people have asked, is this really the sustainable solution? Or should you have trained a model with a certain cutoff date and then say, okay, the current information comes from web browsing. And then you have some cases where this won't be the case, where web browsing won't be activated and won't be relevant. And there has been a scientific study, I think October last year, around about, I can't remember but it's easy to Google. And they looked at, could you, in theory, what you would have to do is influence the training data. And they looked at it from a statistical perspective, because the data set is so large. And they said, is it doable to influence this data? And their answer was, yes, obviously you can influence everything, but it's not feasible, because it would cost so many resources. Maybe a governmental actor or whatever that has endless resources could do it, but as a brand, company, you wouldn't do it. And then the question to me is, wouldn't, for example, a company like ChatGPT, like Google, for example, Google has an interest that their search results are accurate, and at some point they started collaborating with the people who provide the information. And the question is, would ChatGPT then maybe get to a point where they say, okay, maybe as a vendor you can help us provide information to your about your brand, about your products, because we want to get it right. But we're not at this point. So right now we have no way to influence the results. What we have is we can at least get an understanding of what they look like.
In the current version of the tool, are you focused on ChatGPT, or are you looking across a bunch of generative AI engines?
We're looking at all the tools that our clients are asking for. Most are obviously asking for ChatGPT because this is by far the biggest right now. There's also increasing questions about what used to be called search generative experience by Google, now AI overviews, which to me is a different topic. But then there's also increasing requests for Gemini, Perplexity, some people have discovered, but right now ChatGPT is the most requested because it's the most popular for everyone. But in theory, you can do it for any tool, yeah.
All right, thank you, Sven.
Wonderful, thank you.
So I'm going to take over the hosting of this room for the rest of the day.